Hi, everybody. Dick Vitale. Hey, make sure you listen, man, to Locked On Blue Devils with JJ Jackson. He's awesome, baby.
You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to a crossover edition of Locked On Coogs and Locked On Blue Devils. I am one of your hosts, Parker Ainsworth, joined by JJ Jackson of Locked On Blue Devils. JJ, I got to ask, have you ever been to Texas before?
Yes. Funny enough, I was actually there last weekend personally in College Station over at Texas A&M. So it's been a little bit since I've been in the Dallas area. I have been to Houston once in my lifetime, but a fair question to ask, Parker. Have you ever been to North Carolina?
I honestly, we can do this. This is a boring conversation. I looked at colleges out there once upon a time when I was like a senior in high school. Pretty state. I was going to ask though, if you've been to Texas, what about the barbecue do you think is better out here than out in the East Coast?
The briskets are amazing there in Texas, man. That's for sure. I'll give it to you.
Fun matchup this weekend in Dallas at the American Airlines Center. Number 1 seed Houston plays number 4 seed Duke. Frankly, it feels like, a matchup of two very strong programs at any given year. Either team could be a 1 seed or a 4 seed. Lots to get into today. JJ, I want to ask before we get too terribly far into this. Duke has obviously navigated a lot of change the last couple of years. And this year there were times where I felt like, oh, they're the Duke of old. And then there were times like, ooh, they're maybe not. And I'm watching it from afar. Up close and personally, how did you navigate this year's Duke season?
Yeah, it's been fun. It's been a bit of a roller coaster, to your point. Obviously, getting set for the second year under Jon Scheyer, when you have something for 42 years, like Mike Krzyzewski, Coach K being your head coach, longer than I've been alive and on this planet, it takes a while to get adjusted to. And I think the same goes for someone even like Jon Scheyer. His entire life, he didn't know what Duke basketball was like without Coach K being the head coach. And now here we are in his second season. Duke, remember the preseason conversation across the entire college basketball world was, who's the number 1 team? Is it Duke or is it Kansas? And both of those teams kind of followed similar paths up and down throughout the year. This Duke team got off to a fairly decent start, a tough loss against Arizona early on in the season. But then once they got into conference play, really kicked it up into high gear. Could never get over that North Carolina hurdle this season. But definitely say a roller coaster is the best summation of what I've seen from this Duke season.
Roller coasters are fun. And on a fun note, I got to ask, in watching and doing some research on Duke, a lot of TikTok. Tell me about this TikTok thing for a second, because my fans might be the Houston people might be also Googling Duke, like, what is this? They got a guy that's a TikTok star? Yeah,
Jared McCain obviously had a big round of 32 game with 8 3-point shots made against James Madison, has a massive following on TikTok, millions and millions of followers, even going back to his high school days. And so it's been fun to kind of watch him go throughout the season. He's dancing, he paints his fingernails. It's a whole thing. The Duke fans have certainly loved it and embodied all of it. Duke basketball proudly promotes that their own platforms, Duke's got the largest social media follow. I know I'm not speaking anything that college basketball fans probably don't already know, but Duke proudly promotes the fact we've got more followers than anybody on any platform. And then they just so happen to land a high school recruit who has more followers than anybody going in high school basketball. So it's like a marriage of perfect worlds. It has been content galore. And Parker, it's been a whole lot of fun to follow.
Well, and you beat me to the punch because you opened up with he can play, right? That's not just a TikTok star that can't play. Jared McCain mentioned hit 8 threes in the round of 32 game. He's averaging 14 points per game this season. You got Filipowski, the big man. I say big. I guess he does a lot of things. He's not just a traditional big man, averaging 16 points a game. You got 5 guys averaging double figures in Durham. Talk to me about what's the deal with that offense. What's that offense? What makes it tick? What makes it go? What can Cougar fans expect?
A little bit of everything. Yeah, you never really know night in, night out who's going to be the kind of focal point, who's got it going, who's going to take over on the offensive end of the floor. But this is a Duke team that throughout the majority of the season, Jon Scheyer talked a lot about, hey, we've got 6 starters. I get that there's only 5 starters in basketball, but we've got 6 of them. And it's been interchangeable because someone like Jeremy Roach has missed a couple of games. We've seen Tyrese Proctor miss a couple of games as well. Caleb Foster has missed a couple of games, and now Foster's out for the season with an ankle injury. But it was just so hard to find a consistent 5 with bodies that were healthy, but you knew of that top 6, different guys were going to be able to contribute and score well night in, night out. So Roach, I'd say, is probably the most consistent guard scoring-wise that Duke has had throughout the course of the season. As of late, it's been a whole lot of Jared McCain playing really well, scoring the basketball. But then Kyle Filipowski, I think, is kind of the biggest X factor of them all with what he's able to bring offensively for this Duke basketball team, along with Mark Mitchell. The guard play, I think, is going to be great in a game like this. So, Parker, that's what it goes to for me, is like, what does the forwards and the big men for both sides look like, and particularly on Duke? What kind of a game are you going to get out of Mark Mitchell? What kind of a game are you going to get out of Kyle Filipowski?
Both teams got tremendous guards, and it really does make for a fun March Madness. March gets to feel like dominated by guards in a way in the 21st century that it might not have once upon a time. I got to ask, and I don't want to make jokes about Filipowski and the court storming and stuff like that, because there was an injury involved that doesn't feel super right. But what has Filipowski's season been like? Because, weirdly enough, we mentioned the guards, but Filipowski may have the highest pro ceiling out of anyone here. There are going to be a lot of NBA scouts in the arena watching him. He's got a really unique game from afar. What has stood out to you as someone watching him every day?
Yeah, I think last season we saw Filipowski really show off what type of a player he could be in the college game, in particular with that 7-foot size frame and the ability to step out and knock down shots from the outside. Duke basketball a season ago had another freshman in Filipowski's class that people know by the name of Derek Lively II, who's now in Dallas playing for the Mavericks as a first-round pick. But he's more of your typical 5-man, right? And so there wasn't a whole lot of space down low for Filipowski to get those post touches and that sort of thing. So I have been really impressed with Filipowski's scoring ability in the post throughout the course of this season, because that's not typically what we had seen from him throughout his freshman year. A little bit more of that outside shot. He still knocks down that outside shot, not at as good of a clip as we might have hoped going into the season. But he really can score from all parts of the floor, and I think that's what makes him so dynamic.
Obviously, no team is perfect. Every team has lost some games. There's no undefeated Kentucky team like a few years back or whatever. So I don't mean to say Houston's got none, but as you've watched Duke all year long, what is the whole? Because again, 5 guys in double figures. They got multiple guys over 15 minutes a game. Obviously, Foster being down changed that a little bit, but they seem like a very well put together team, and they did go 26-8 so far. So what's the whole?
You hate to say consistency because it just seems like such an easy answer to sort of give you, but I feel like that's been kind of the biggest thing for the Duke team. When they've been playing their absolute best and being connected on the defensive end of the floor, that's been able to set up the offense as well. Early on in the year, Duke was one of the absolute top half-court set offensive teams in the entire country because, look, you go and you've got 5 shooters typically for the most part out there on the floor. Pass the ball around, you're going to find an open shot and an open look that you like. But when the defense wasn't able to get those stops and Duke was turning the ball over and playing careless on both ends of the floor, it made it more difficult for them to be successful. So I think the consistency piece has been one of the tough things to watch for the Duke team in particular. I know that's not going to be the case in a one-game type scenario like this in a Sweet 16 matchup, but I'd be really curious to see how aggressive Duke can be on the defensive end of the floor to create some chances on the offensive end, because they've been pretty good running the half-court sets. But I think in a game like this in March, the difference can oftentimes be who's turning the other team over, who's getting those points out in transition, who's getting points off of turnovers.
I want to turn the tables here in a second, but quickly, Houston is 4 hours-ish, maybe 4.5 hours south of Dallas. The games are in Dallas this weekend. How well do you anticipate Duke traveling?
Very well. I really do. I think this is obviously a Duke basketball brand that's been around for quite some time. I think they're going to make it a point to be there in Texas. to show out and be strong. I don't know that it's going to be outnumbering Houston. I wouldn't go as far to say that, but yeah, it's kind of wild, man. You see Duke people all over the place. People love to be attached to kind of the winners, and I know that has come out throughout life, that when you win, people want to be a part of what you're doing. And Coach K was able to establish that over 42 years. Jon Scheyer's done the same thing. So, yeah, I definitely think Duke's going to travel well.
Well, you mentioned a legacy of winning or a career of winning, and this week's March Madness Bracket Highlights brought to you by our friends at Nissan, who kind of have a career doing the same thing, honestly. Each week, they're picking one team that stands out and a team that's pushed it further than the rest. Just like any of the new 2024 Nissan SUVs, these guys are able to take it to the next level, and I think I'm going to upset some folks in Durham, but the North Carolina Tar Heels can only be described as a Nissan Armada. This one seed is as hardcore as it gets out there, so it's no wonder why they secured the top spot in the Sweet 16 this Thursday against Alabama in the NCAA Tournament. They're favorite to pick. They're picked as a favorite, to make a run to that championship game in that regional. Take the Nissan Rogue, Pathfinder, or Armada and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. And I also want to talk to you a little bit about Better Together. Now, JJ, I think we're in a couple of groups on this, but Better Together is this really cool app where you get to pick more than or less than on a bunch of different statistical categories and play daily fantasy sports while also talking to your friends, like a combination of a social media app as well as a pick'em type of deal here. You get to play daily fantasy sports in a new and exciting way with your friends and socializing, get on the same picks, all in and picking against one another. All kinds of options there at Better Together. So make sure you go to Better Together and download the app today from the App Store. Use promo code Locked On for a free $5 entry on any NCAA basketball contest. If you can download Better Together right now in the App Store, sign up, use promo code Locked On, free $5 entry NCAA basketball contests. Promo code Locked On, because win alone is fun, but winning is better together. All right. What do folks in Durham not know about Houston?
Yeah, that's the big question. It's a Locked On crossover, Locked On Blue Devils and Locked On Cougs here on this Thursday. Really excited to be talking with Parker Ainsworth, the host of Locked On Cougs, and my Blue Devil listeners know my voice, I'm sure. JJ Jackson here from the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. So Houston, I could see the numbers, 32-4 on the season, Big 12 regular season champions. Open-ended question, Parker. How were they able to get here? What's been the secret formula for Houston to have such a strong showing through 36 games this season?
Defense. They've played a lot of ugly basketball games and been on the right side of 32 of them. And I don't mean that pejoratively. It's actually really gritty, grimy fun. Texas is a football state, and there are times it looks like they're playing football on a basketball court. It gets physical, and they really, they had 4 guys foul out in the A&M game in the round of 32. The 5th starter had 4 fouls as well. They were down to playing walk-ons at the end of that game. But they really are going to push the limits of the physicality and just kind of see what you're made of. They will play games down in the 60s, and I don't mean that to say that they can't score up in the 80s and 90s, because they score 100 points in the round of 32 game. But their preference is to play down a slower pace as far as like less possessions in the game and just grind it out. Great offensive rebounding team. Again, does a lot of dirty things in the best way possible. I don't mean to make it out to be like the big bad supervillain or whatever, but a dirty basketball.
Yeah, and it's working, right? You said they come out on top 32 times already this season, trying to make it 33 in the Sweet 16 to advance to an Elite 8. It's a Houston team that's got some players and figures that we've known in college basketball for a couple of years. We've talked a little bit about the guard play for Duke. When you talk about Tyrese Proctor and Jared McCain and Jeremy Roach, it's been guard play as well on both ends of the floor, but particularly the offensive side, I'd say, for this Houston team. Tell the Duke fans a little bit about some of these Houston guards that they need to be aware of.
Yeah, so all 3 of the starting backcourt average over 12 points per game. They kind of average that because they take turns. Whoever's got the more favorable matchup that week ends up getting closer to 20, and then when they don't, they get closer to 4, right? So I don't mean to say they're all typically going to get 12. It's just kind of whose night it is. Jamal Shead is the highlight star, though. He is player of the year in the conference, defense player of the year in the conference as well. He plays on both sides. He's the kind of guy that is going to give you a double-double when it's his turn to score, but he will always get right around that 7, 8, 9, 10 assists in these big games. His assist number on the season's actually pulled down some because they had some blowouts early in the year where he got pulled early in the game because they were winning by so much, didn't matter. And then LJ Crier's the sharpshooter, originally from the Houston area, went to Baylor, was on that national championship team as a freshman, and then transferred back home. Once Houston was joined the Big 12, wanted to continue to play big-time basketball, saw a chance to do it in his hometown and transferred back. And Manuel Sharp, he's an East Coast kid. I guess he's from Tampa, Florida as well. Really, really fun tree to watch as far as taking turns scoring the basketball. And really, like I said, they just find the best matchup. And I hadn't done enough film work to know who that is on Duke yet. They've got some really talented guards themselves, but Sampson and company definitely has one. They're gonna go to that guy to start the game and just ride it out till something changes.
In the front court, what does that look like? Because we talk so often about guards. We've talked a lot about Kyle Filipowski and Mark Mitchell, what they're going to be able to do on the interior for this Duke basketball team. Are there offensive threats there? The defense, is it anchored by those players in the post for Houston? Who are the names? Who are the players that Duke fans need to be aware of there on the interior that you'd see likely matching up with Duke's bigger players?
So Houston starts J1 Roberts and Javier Francis. J1's about 6'8". Francis is about 6'9". The deal is Houston's got like a very prototypical kind of build they look for. They look for the 6'8" to 6'10" and like crazy long wingspan. So Javier Francis is going to hop out there at 6'9", but he's got a 7'5" wingspan. So it looks like he can defend the rim in a way that's a little bit different. J1 Roberts, fairly similar proportions. And the deal here is that really Francis is a rim finisher. He's more of a defensive guy. Roberts is a guy they've gone to at different points this season to really like be a focal point of from passing the basketball down the block. He's a really, really talented playmaker from that area. He has really good court vision. And frankly, Houston has benefited from being 6'8"ish and 6'9"ish and playing traditional post spots. They're not like looking at the pros in the same kind of way. So they have been there for a while, do have some experience, and are veteran guys. I mean, Jalen Roberts is a fifth-year guy. He was back again. He was a young redshirt on that Final Four team Houston had in 2021. And he's been around the block a little bit, to say the least. He's a little banged up. He always seems to be banged up by this time of year. I think right now he's got. I think that the hand stitches are healed up. He's got a shin. He's working with a deep contusion or something. It's always something with him. But those are the two guys that start a lot. And then truthfully, and I don't. Houston fans don't not want to talk about this part too much. Houston's got injuries in basically the rest of their backup forward spots. They play a couple different guys that are kind of small ballish type fours, 6'5", 6'ish type guys, and Malik Wilson and Damian Dunn. Ramon Walker is back for the tournament. He's listed at 6'4", but he's like a Dennis Rodman type. And then the other guy, if they really had to put a true big guy out there, is Ced Lott. He is 19 years old, started playing basketball at 15 in the Ivory Coast. Like, he is very, very raw. He's listed at 6'10", 270. Like, he's a big dude, but he is still learning the game. And so the foul trouble, as it did against A&M, can get you in a little bit of a bind there. But they've got some veterans in the starting lineup, and they feel really comfortable with those guys long enough to keep on the floor.
Again, it's a Locked On crossover. It's Locked On Cougs and Locked On Blue Devils. I'm JJ Jackson with Parker Ainsworth here. So talking about this matchup a little bit more and ways for Houston to be successful, ways for Duke to be successful. Got a whole lot more coming. Before we shift gears one more time here, Parker, I got to ask, 4 losses this season. It's a little bit easier to remember them when there aren't as many. When it has gone wrong for Houston, what's been the reason for that?
So you got the 2 losses, one at Iowa State and one at TCU, that were the start of the Big 12 play, both on the road. You had at Kansas, always a tough place to play, by 13 in the Big 12 championship game, which is the third game in 3 days. Houston lost by like 30 or something. It was crazy, a big blowout. Truthfully, in each of those games, it looked like their legs ran out of energy on offense. Their defense was still stout, kept the other team at relatively good scoring numbers from a defensive perspective. But honestly, the deal was that Iowa State game and the Big 12 championship game in the tournament, traveling up to Iowa State in the snow, playing TCU a couple days later, their legs got stagnant. The jump shots did not fall from 3, and that really hurt a lot of what they were doing. They still tried to play a slow, ugly pace and really grind it out. But it looked even uglier and slower when the jump shots didn't fall. So going minutes at a time without scoring, I guess, is a real problem when things are not going our way.
Have to see how this one goes for both of these teams. Duke and Houston coming up Friday night in Dallas, the South Regional semifinal, 9:40 p.m. Eastern on CBS. We'll be watching it as well. Let's talk a little bit more about this game, some big storylines, things to look out for, and other things. But we've got to take one more quick break here on this episode of the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, our show today is brought to you by our friends over at Amazon. We're talking about the Amazon Fire TV, where Fire TV is your destination for sports. From live games to highlights, in-depth analysis, Fire TV offers amazing viewing experiences with smart TVs, as well as the Fire TV stick that you could plug into your existing TV that provides access to millions of movies and TV episodes, as well as free and live TV. Here's something fun. Fire TV has recently created Fire TV channels to deliver a constant supplies of the latest videos from your favorite sports brands, all for free. That includes all of us at Locked On and most of the big pro leagues and college conferences as well. Fire TV channels let you dive into all the game analysis, highlights, and more to keep up to date on all the latest in the world of sports, from March Madness to the NBA, Major League Baseball, and so much more. Not to mention great news, entertainment, gaming, travel, cooking videos as well. Check out Fire TV channels on Fire TV and Alexa devices. If you haven't checked out Fire TV channels, you should. Trust me on this. To learn more, visit Amazon.com/LockedOnFireTV. Final few moments here on this episode. It's a Locked On crossover of Locked On Blue Devils and Locked On Cougs. I'm JJ Jackson from the Duke side of things. Parker Ainsworth is there from the Houston side of things. Parker, I'll turn it over to you, my friend, here, because we've got a game to preview, a big one. Both of these teams trying to get over to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, I got to ask, we're still, it feels like from afar, early in the Jon Scheyer legacy he's building, or the story or he's writing, or whatever artistic metaphor you want to go to. What's a win on Friday night mean for that? I mean, what's at stake for Jon?
Yeah, I mean, the first trip to an Elite Eight. It's a Duke basketball team that has been very successful when it comes to postseason success. Looking at the numbers, Duke would be going and advancing to their 18th Elite Eight appearance in school history, but just the first under Coach Jon Scheyer. So to be able to kind of check off that box to move on for a chance to play and go to the Final Four would be so big, because he's got a team that I think he really likes. A lot of people already talking about this top-ranked recruiting class that Duke has for next season, featuring the top player in the country in Cooper Flagg. But we're not ready to turn the page just yet there. I think Jon Scheyer really wants to keep playing basketball with this group here. So I think that's going to be a big opportunity for him to take the school to their 18th Elite Eight appearance, but just the first under head coach Jon Scheyer.
Yeah, and I feel like that's interesting because, you got Jon Scheyer at the start of his coaching career. Houston's got Kelvin Sampson kind of in what feels like a very successful few waning moments of his own. It's an interesting dichotomy back and forth here, right? Because Sampson had the long career originally at Montana Tech, if you want to go far enough back, but then Washington State, and then Oklahoma, and then briefly to Indiana before having to hop over to the pro side of things. And it's kind of had this retirement project almost where he's really built Houston's program back. And it's interesting you talk about your first Elite Eight under Scheyer, because I don't know that I'd put that together. Houston's in their fifth straight Sweet 16, and it kind of feels like, you almost get used to it. I'm sure Duke fans had that once upon a time not that long ago also, but you almost get used to it, and you try not to take things for granted. I wonder if people will be happy with ending things at the Sweet 16 another time. I feel like last year's team, you could argue, couple injuries happened. They didn't get any farther than that. And, people might have been disappointed. How many times do you feel, want to feel disappointed in that? Is that a thing? How quickly can a program get to that point? It's a weird spot to be in, though. And I feel like we're kind of coming to that similar spot from different angles. You with a new coach and us with an older one.
It's really hard to win in March, really hard to win this time of year in a tournament format. And I think that's why we keep watching it each and every year. I mentioned a team like Kansas, who's in the conversation with Duke, preseason number one going into the season. They're already out of it after the first weekend there. Injuries play a role in it. Game winners and lucky breaks and big shots like that play a role in it. We talk about Mike Krzyzewski and what he's been able to do for that Duke program. He's the greatest college basketball coach of all time, in my opinion, having been there for 42 years. And yet, Parker, 42 years, he only had 5 national championships. Way more times than not, you're walking away kind of dissatisfied with what the end result of a season is. For Duke fans out there, I was looking into the numbers a little bit, Parker, about the significance of this Houston run and what it means. And I stumble across 6 Final Four appearances for the school, the Houston Cougars. That's the most for anybody to have never won a national championship. So trying to get over that final hump, Duke's a big hurdle in the way. But just again, the context of how difficult it is once we get to this time of year.
Duke's a big hurdle, and then my listeners are also
everything else.
We're chuckling though at the fact that NC State is also in this regional, and when you say hadn't won a championship, NC State and 80, I mean that stings. The 5-7 jam that stings, like because you're right, you're absolutely correct. It's so hard to win these games in March. And Houston, it's not just the most Final Fours without a championship. It's the most Final Fours in the state of Texas. It's the most straight Sweet 16s in the Big 12. They're one of 2 Big 12 teams left. It's a lot of things that indicate that Houston is a strong program, but it don't mean a thing if you ain't got that ring, right? That's just where we're at right now.
Yeah, you want to get to the Final Four. You want to win a national championship. You want to be the last team standing. You want one shining moment to be playing as your team is up there on the stage. And like when we think of Kyle Filipowski, when we think of Jamal Shead or LJ Cryer, you want to think of them as a national champion, right? Not regular season championships are great and all, and going to a conference tournament and having success there. If you're able to do that, awesome. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I know everybody's playing for this big thing at the end of it. And that's why I think this game is going to be so amazing. I think when we look across the sport, with this being Thursday, we're going to see a couple of Sweet 16 games a little bit later this evening. I think this is the most intriguing matchup. I think it could go really either way. When you look at a game like this, I truly am so excited to see how this one plays out tomorrow night.
It's an exciting one for sure. I think it's frankly the reason. There's a reason it's the 8:40 game. It's the 1 versus 4. Chalk had to play out for this to get here, obviously. This was one they were assuming they were going to get, and they put it at 9:40 Eastern.
Yeah, you're
right
talking
there.
Local time there. For Duke fans showing up in the state of Texas, it'll be 8:40 on your clock. Yeah.
That's when everyone is going to be like, okay, this is the dessert at the end of the night, watching these 2 teams play together and against one another. It's a fun one. It's frankly, it's going to be tough. It's going to be, hard to win, but that's kind of what you want in March, right? And that's the point of these things.
No doubt about it. I think ultimately this game comes down to can Duke score against that Houston defense? As you said, one of the top defense in all of college basketball. What, average 57 points? What opponents are scoring against Houston? That's insane. It's a Duke team that's coming off really impressive shooting performances there in the round of 32. If they can score the basketball, they're going to have a chance. But again, that is a really tough ask when you look at the bulk of those big guards that Houston has. So I think it really comes down to what kind of offense can Duke really get into against that Houston team, Parker. What does it come down to for you?
My biggest thing is going to be, so you mentioned Houston's holding team to an average of 57 points per game. I don't think it keeps Duke quite that low, but whatever the score is that they hold Duke to, will their offense be able to keep up? Will foul trouble or something persist? Can they play a clean, defensively stout defensive performance? And, again, hopefully have some home court advantage kind of feel. You're just a few hours away from home. Houston's kind of known this is going to be their Sweet 16 route for a while now because of just the way the seeds are going to shake out. And so you kind of hope all those things go your way. But Duke has been on the good and bad side of some crazy March Madness finishes across, the 42 years, now a couple of years with Scheyer, and it's hard to count on anything in March. So you don't know what you're going to see, I guess. Yeah,
no doubt. It's going to deliver. It always does. This game's going to be excellent. The matchups are going to be great. Again, I do worry in a game like this with Kyle Filipowski there on the interior. He's been prone to foul trouble. I'm concerned about Duke's lack of depth, so to speak. They're in the front court. I know you mentioned some of those front court injuries for Houston, kind of deeper into their bench as well. So how the game is officiated, I think, is going to be also very important in this. I said this earlier in the week, but to bring home the point once again, we saw 75 combined free throw attempts in the double overtime game between in the overtime game between Houston and Texas A&M. 75 free throw attempts. In the same round, in the round of 32, we saw 19 free throw attempts in a double overtime game between Creighton and Oregon. And allegedly it's the same sport, right? So really curious to see how this one plays out and how many trips to the free throw line both these teams are going to be able to get.
I'd be down for the 19 myself.
I'm there with you.
My name is Parker Ainsworth, the host of Locked On Cougs. Thank you again, JJ, for agreeing to doing this. It's always great to hear the other team's perspective and get a good laugh in before things get really, really competitive. You do Locked On Blue Devils. Tell people where are you at these days? What all you got going on over at the Blue Devils channel?
Oh, yeah. We're basketball heavy every single day, 365 days a year. Football is a sport, but we mainly focus on basketball there in the Hoop State. So, for Houston fans out there, if you are ever interested in what Duke's going on, check us out at Locked On Blue Devils. My followers, thank you so much for your support. Make sure you subscribe to both of our channels on YouTube. It means a lot when you do that. And then follow me on X at _JJ_Jackson_. So thanks so much, Parker, for the invite. Glad we were able to do a crossover like this.
Man, me too. Good to see you. I always wrap up saying "Go Cougs." Do y'all have hand signs in Durham?
We're not quite cool enough. Yeah, haven't made it that far yet. So let's go Duke. And thanks, Parker. This is